Thank you. Don't call us.
All right. I call to order the Redevelopment Agency meeting for tonight, Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. First item of business is the adoption of the budget for the RDA for fiscal year 24. We're going to hear about this from Ms. Stack.
Okay, so we're bringing to you Resolution 240 adopting the budget for the Redevelopment Agency for next fiscal year 2024, which starts Saturday. Council, you or board, you have had several work sessions on the Redevelopment Agency, particularly on the improvements that have been proposed. Do we have the next slide? These are the changes, or these are how what is represented in the budget that is being asked to be adopted. As you requested during the last work session. Redevelopment Agency area number 1 would budget $300,000 for the Redwood Lighting Project and $130,000 for the Redwood Road North exit, with $100,000 of it being for lights, power, and signage, and $30,000 for entry beautification. And that RDA 4 would be contributing towards the 70th Southeast entrance with $100,000 for that same signage and $450,000 for entry beautification. That is more the one that we showed you that had that whole hill landscaping. So that's why it's a little more expensive. So those are proposed in the Redevelopment Agency as the improvements. Any contributions towards improvements from RDA's numbers 2 and 5 were removed from the budget. So those are the changes, and we ask for you to move to approve Resolution 240. Thank you.
Any questions from from the board? We'll start with board member Green. Then
I was just going to make a motion to approve RDA resolution number 240.
Second.
All right, motion by board member Green, second by board member Whitelock. Discussion to the motion. I'll begin. And this may be part of the next item, the RDA, RDA wrap-up. We talked about some of the adjacent projects. I know the one for me that stuck out was lighting on Redwood Road north of 70th that fronts that district. Is that something that we should expect to see in a later budget amendment? Is there a timeline that goes along with that? The other question was, I know it was brought up the need for a determination of the design, and there was a request last time, or Mr. Astle made comment last time about the council's support of a specific design. Are those going to be, where do those fall in relation to the budget?
Sure.
If separate, we can talk about that separately because we do have this is discussion to the motion.
Let's talk about that on your next item.
Okay. Any other discussion to this motion? Board member Jacob, sorry.
Call me whatever you'd like, just not late for dinner.
Tonight, I think you are.
Well, I ate it while we were here. I'm not so sure that I'm a big fan of the 70th South project. That's a lot of money to be putting into. I'm going to get in big trouble for saying exactly what I'm thinking, but the lipstick on a pig analogy kind of comes into play, and I don't want to say that's so much harsher than I mean it, but that's just the analogy that comes to my head. I'm much more in favor of starting at the city center and building beautification outward than starting on the edges and trying to build inward. You know what I mean? I think $500,000 on around here, when I say here, I mean where we're sitting, could go a lot further than putting up a really nice little entrance over on one area that still leads into a not pretty area. I mean, the city has taken steps in the past to try and acquire property to beautify that area, and we're only a little bit into that. So, you know, that's a decades-long process, and this is one piece of. I mean, we got the station area plans going in over there as well. That kind of would apply. You know, that would be in the Gardner Village circle of the station area plan. There's just a lot. I don't know. It's just a really big project for what I think is is not the right place to spend money. That's not to say I'm going to be against the budget again, like we talked about before. Not everybody gets what they want. I just still don't think that that's quite the right expense.
Board Member Green, then I want to make a comment.
You just got me thinking on something, Board Member Jacob. And it's dangerous when I think. I know it is. But this would be as you mentioned about spending that much money just on that facade. I'm thinking about 2-3 blocks further west along 70th South. The city owns a bunch of property along that we've bought property along 70th South, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Across the street from Heartland.
Yeah, some of those pieces across the street from Heartland. And to be honest with you, some of those pieces of property aren't very pretty. And what's that?
That's the big. The city owned ones that are not attractive. That's all I was talking about.
Well, and so what he got me thinking about here is, would some of that money be better off being spent on some of those properties across from Heartland, either, and I don't want to do anything that costs a lot of maintenance, but would there be some pocket park design or community gardens or something that enhances the area, and it would enhance it better than the gateway sign 3 blocks east? So I hate it when you make me start thinking, Zach.
So my question, then we'll jump over to Councilman or Board Member Whitelock. My question is going back to the night Mr. Astle was here talking about this. He highlighted the need for these projects because they are tied up with UDOT and UDOT's providing funding. Is that
Okay, so the part that's tied up right now is we need a sign design, right? We need to go through the design process.
Can we back up to the slide that has the different amounts for the?
So we have the $300,000 for UDOT. That's the RDA number 1. That's that first line. That is obligated pretty much. Either that or we have to take it out of the general fund, right? Or the streetlight fund. So that's a good place for that and a good use for that. The Redwood Road North entrance has a direct nexus into the RDA 1 as well. So you could finish design on the signage, right, for the city with that sign's allocation of $130,000. So we could do the work out of RDA number 1, and if the board so chooses to remove the work that is allocated out of RDA 4 and have further discussions on improvements in the next few months, we can do that through this amendment. So you could amend, or you could say, we're going to adopt the budget with amendments as discussed tonight, and I will make the change in the final version. If you choose to remove the funding for improvements from RDA 4, I would highly suggest that we remain funding in RDA 1 because that will pay for the design for the signage that UDOT will also use on 90th South that we do not need to contribute to. So we need one sign to go in so we can enter into design, land on a sign, give it to UDOT so they can do their 90th South project, let UDOT do their lighting project, and we contribute towards it. And then do the ones, at least at a minimum, the one signage project.
And how much of a balance is still remaining in the fund?
There are several million.
Okay, so we still could address some of the other items.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I think there
Board.
needs to be some significant discussion by this board as to how to utilize the funds in RDAs 1, 2, 4, and 5. I really think that would be beneficial.
Board Member Whitelock.
So my thoughts are, we had this discussion when Isaac was here, and I thought our direction was, and it was, to do these, and that's why they're being brought back. And the analogy I'm going to use is when you're selling your home and a realtor comes to your home, what the front of your home looks like matters, and they'll tell you that. They'll tell you, make sure your front door looks good. If it's summer, go ahead and plant a few plants, even if you don't usually do that. There is a home currently in North Ogden. that's right around the corner from a Parade Homes home. And they're laying sod without a sprinkling system because they want sod there so that when people drive by their house, because it's up for sale, to the Parade Homes home, it shows well. And entry matters because it shows well. Sure, could we use this money in another area? You bet. Could this city use improvement in a lot of areas? Yes. But the entryway matters. That's where people first come in. That's where people sometimes drive on 4000 West and say, I know when I'm leaving West Jordan and going into South Jordan. And all that, I think, is a slurry on top that makes it look good. I don't think the underneath is any better. But there's a distinct line and you see it. And people notice those things. So for me, this is really important. And this council, whether it's been a council or a board, has pushed for beautification in the city. So now staff brings us beautification in the city, not only tonight, but they brought it at a work meeting where we said yes. And now we're saying, oh, we don't know if we really want to do this. Well, I really want to do this, even though that is a lot of money. But trees, well, trees are really expensive, like $300 plus, probably more this year than they were last year. So when we have, if we want people to invest in West Jordan, we have to invest in West Jordan. And when people drive into our city, if the first thing they see is not good, that's their first impression. Just like when you walk up to a door to go inside, if the first impression isn't good, it affects the rest of your drive or the rest of your tour of that home. If you can have the first impression be good, then the rest of it goes better. So I think this is at the final step. No, is it a good step? Yes, and I'm supportive. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Quick, can you refresh us on the motion?
Just move to approve.
Yes, it's just moved to approve resolution number 240, adopting the annual budget for the Redevelopment Agency of West Jordan City for fiscal year 2024.
All right. Is there any other discussion to the motion before we vote? Not seen any online, and I am realizing I neglected to mention at the beginning of the meeting that all board members are present with the exception of board member Worthen. So there are only 6 present tonight. With that, Ms. Quick, let's vote.
Okay, council member or board member Whitelock,
Yes.
board member Green,
Yes.
chairperson McConaughey.
Aye.
Board member Pack,
Yes.
board member Jacob,
No.
and vice chair Bloom.
Yes.
I show the motion passes 5-1. Thank you.
All right. So our next item for this is it's listed as RDA Wrap-up, but rather than wrap-up, it's kind of more next steps. I think there may have been some gaps in communication on this one because when we had our last conversation, we did leave with a number of questions like other projects that were needed. What would the priority of those be? What did the board want to do next? Some of the questions like came up this evening that why through my questions out, Ms. Dex suggested, well, let's wait since it's not directly tied to this. Mr. Pengra, would you like to take a moment and kind of fill us in on what questions are still out there lingering for the board, where we need to go, what conversations the council needs to have, and then or the board needs to have, and I'd like to look to the board to find out what items we'd like to prioritize for future conversation and how soon do we want to have those conversations.
Board, not much to present to you right now, just to let you know that we've begun the process in earnest with Lewis, Young, Roberts, and Birmingham, going through the strategic planning process for the redevelopment agency. So right now, the phase of that process that we're in is the data collection, which has been somewhat hampered by recent events. But we do, I think that we have probably near 100% of the data that we need to provide to them so that they can get up to speed and know where we're at. We have already prepared overviews for Lewis Young on each of the independent project areas and the fund balances. And what we're going to do then is we will be coming back to the board and leading a discussion to go through those fund balances with a predetermined list of item of potential capital investments that we know of. And then we open it to discussion for anything that you would like to add. So we'll get the process started for you so that we're not all sitting here scratching our heads, and we can have a robust conversation about other potential capital investments that we can make and kind of what the prohibitions would be on those specific blocks of funds. So we will be prepared to have a good, I think, discussion that you can help lead the direction. Does that answer your question, Chair?
To an extent. So I'm just one of 7, so I'd be curious where the others fall. But for me, it would be helpful to see a sort of timeline saying this is what we expect the process to look like. We expect there's some things that are currently in motion, like the design for the entry signage. When does that need to happen? When does UDOT start their items? When does the council get engaged with this strategic planning process? What are some of those steps and how do they play out? I know we have some funds that have to be expended by a certain time. What are those deadlines on those funds? It'd be really helpful for me to see a timeline with a bigger picture, because for years we've sat up here and had RDA meetings almost from a purely well, because they're required. We have so many per year. We just do it. We accept the budget and then we move on. We haven't had much of the strategic conversation. So as we've started to have these, it's interesting hearing, oh, there's actually quite a bit that needs to be happening. So seeing the timeline for me would be helpful. Two in agreement with that? Are there 2 others, 3, 4? Okay.
Yeah.
So if we could get that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we can absolutely put that together for you.
Other things that would be interesting to me, looking at some of the specific areas. I appreciate you talking a little bit more in detail about some of these specific areas. As we're looking at entrances to the city, I'm very familiar with 70th South, 78th South. It's funny, no matter how many times I drive up there, I'll run through the cemetery pretty regularly. It was only a couple weeks ago that I realized that that's where the entrance monument for the city is, 78th South. I keep scratching my head at Gardner Village. So it's kind of funny. Cafe Rio in Midvale, if you go inside and look, they've got the name Midvale on the inside of Cafe Rio, and inside the A, they're claiming Gardner Village is theirs. It's kind of funny. They've actually got 2 of the letters that have Gardner Village in there. And as you're coming in through 78 South, there's a big pedestal right there that looks like it should have a statue or something. There's a Gardner Village sign behind it. I keep wondering, well, why isn't there West Jordan, welcome to West Jordan, or something like that there? And then as you go up the hill past Gardner Village, you're on the north side of the road, but on the south side of the road, inside the cemetery, that's where you see the West Jordan sign. On the opposite side of the street, you don't really see it. It's just kind of weird. So having somebody help pull together, what is the plan? Does this really make sense? Where do we want to go with that? I think would be really helpful for each of these different project areas. That said, I've jeopardized more time than I intended to anyway. So I'll go to Board Member Green, then Board Member Whitelock, and then anyone else who wants to chime in.
I agree that what we haven't done over the last couple of 3 years is had really meaningful discussions about what we're doing as an RDA. And I think we need to. Things, for example, 78 Board Member Whitelock is 100% right. If we're working on entrances, we need to work on, and we made that decision with this budget. We need to work on the 7800 South entrance. We need to get people to start to understand that Gardner Village is in West Jordan. I mean, I had a discussion with with Chamber West. When you look at the website, Gardner Village is located in the southwest area. It's not located in West Jordan. And am I paranoid? Yeah. Am I tired of that? Yeah. So I'd like to work on the 78 South entrance. For me, just to throw out a couple other things, I would love to work on some of those city-owned properties that are just sitting there vacant on 70th South, and how can we improve those so they don't look run down? And I would love to be able to take some of that RDA money that's, I think it's RDA number, the 90th South one. Is that RDA 4? I'd love to be able to look at RDA 4 about what we can do around both Spratling properties in that RDA. And there's another weed field just north of Burger King. What can we do there? Let's have the meaningful discussion, you know, and even on the south side of 90th South, you know, the parking lot of Walker Edison. And is there meaningful things we can do in that particular piece of property as well? So I just want to make sure. I think that what I would love to do is have some meaningful discussions, some prioritized discussions, where we're going with the money. But yeah, like I said, 70th, some of that stuff on 90th, the 78 South stuff. I think there's a couple areas that we can focus on. And, you know, the other thing is we've talked about lighting from 66 South to 70th. So do we need to put more lights in there? Look at a few of those things to enhance the showability of the city, whatever, so that we, you know, that when people come in from the north, from the north of Redwood, and I still want to turn the Big Dog Pond sign into Welcome to West Jordan, but I'm not sure we're going to get there.
Board Member Whitelock.
Yeah, I think graffitis, you can't do that. So I don't have to do that to that sign. Just for Chair McConaughey, when I inquired, I was told that our welcome sign to West Jordan is the one that's down on the Jordan River Trail, because there's also one down there by Gardner Village. So you've got the railroad where Gardner Village sign is, and then you go down and there's how you get onto the Jordan River Parkway. There's a sign there. There's an entryway sign there. And that's what I was told. And of course you cannot see that from the roadway. So yes, we do need to have.
I want to look at that on a map with you after.
I helped weed that and plant plants in it a few years ago. It's there.
Oh, yeah, that's like the base of the little podium that looks like it should have a statue or something like that. Yeah, it says Welcome to West Jordan, but it's below the sight line. You can only see it when you're right there on the
trail.
Yeah, that's not a sign so much as it is like a
marker
base, like a mount or something.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Chair, I just want to say a couple brief things. One, from a planning perspective, you're absolutely right. And I know that you are probably aware of this. We've been working for some time. We were working on going through a strategic planning process with the RDA specifically. I think appropriately we pulled that back and combined it with an overall strategic plan for economic development. That way we're not ending up with plans that aren't compatible. And so that's part of the reason for the delay. But I also want to make sure that you as RDA board members understand that most of these project areas have not been neglected or without thought. I'll just remind you of a few different projects that we've explored. Very, very early when I came into this position, we were trying to build momentum in the Southwest quadrant, which is, the numbers in the EDA 5 is that one. Those things stalled out for various reasons. The progress is still happening, but we're going through that strategic planning with Lewis Young, specifically to look at how to bring the tax increment component into that area. Same thing with CDA 2. We've done the truck ranch deal. We worked on a surf park that didn't work out on 2 different parcels we tried to look at. We've been pursuing other projects there. We're still working on that Spratling property for you, Board Member Green, with a youth hockey complex. We are looking at all of these areas, and we are having conversations with developers. We owe it to you to put that all in plain writing and be better at communicating, and we'll put the effort into doing that. Bring it all back, and we can discuss all those items. So,
how far out do you think we'd be looking at a conversation to see that timeline?
I can bring that back to you as early as next month to give you a timeline. I don't know that we're going to be ready to have that robust conversation at that time, but I will work with Lewis Young to put that timeline together.
If the timeline's something that can be communicated through email, I think the sooner
Yeah,
the better.
absolutely.
I think we'd rather not have a meeting just for one little piece that could be sent through email, but would very much like to see that. Board Member Jacob.
Thanks. I just wanted to highlight, well, first of all, when we do have that meeting, I'd love to come back. We've done this before with certain things with the ranking polls with the different options, like we did with Veterans Memorial Park just a couple weeks ago. And we did it several years ago with impact fees on parks and ranked where we like those things spent and stuff like that. And, that way you get a council consensus, even though not everybody agrees, right? That would be helpful. And this just highlights to me again the importance of getting the strategic plan right for, at least for the east edge of the city, for the downtown area, and getting this vision done and not done, but at least a plan in place. So there's a because the RDA piece could have a huge role in that. There's budget there. There's ways to get a lot of that ball rolling that we just haven't, because we keep looking at little pieces when developer brings in well, I got this 12 acres or that 12 acres instead of the 300 acres that the state wants us to plan for.
Yeah.
Once that's in place, then we know what part the RDA can play in that, right? So it's a matter of getting all the pieces in place and coming up with a real big strategic plan, as opposed to saying, well, here's one sign that's in the wrong place that could be better looking. Well, yeah, but let's get the thing bigger. You know what I mean? Let's go big.
And to that point, with the city center project, that's the reason why I presented on that plan. I didn't have anything to do with the creation of that plan, obviously, but I'd argue that without the RDA, city center can't happen.
And I'm just going to interject. Tomorrow night is the station area plan meeting.
I
So
will be there.
just a reminder.
All right, Mr. Lee.
Thank you,
Mr. Davidson.
Council Chair.
Mr. Davidson's mic says Mr. Lee. So for anyone listening, we don't have video of that.
Thank you.
It's not Mr. Lee.
I appreciate the conversation that is happening relative to the RDA. We do have limited resources. Well, for example, the resources may look, I guess you could say, sufficient. They are quite limited when you consider the overall context of what we're trying to accomplish. One of the things that Chris and I have been talking about is how we can essentially strategically approach economic development and redevelopment in the community and look at it from a higher altitude perspective, and to engage you as a council, to engage the business community, to engage the education community, to engage neighborhoods in these conversations, so that we can come up with a plan that specifically addresses the needs not just of one stakeholder, but of multiple stakeholders. When we start having conversations about specific executables as to what we are going to do now with limited resources, I kind of feel like we're missing a step. In order for us to truly understand where we want to go and where the destination we want to arrive at, we've got to develop a plan, and then we've got to put the pieces together to get to that plan. That's why Chris and I have been focused in recent times about putting together a plan, getting together some third-party experts who can help us see
at an altitude much higher than where potentially we are with one specific project or one specific plan, whether it be a station area plan or a particular development or a particular even corridor. What do we want to do in general from a visionary perspective? And then how can we accomplish it? So I guess the caution I would extend is, I think it's good to have conversations about specific projects and specific needs, but I think they need to be had in relation to the overall plan, and how do those specific conversations fit with the overall plan and the limited resources that we have.
I think I agree. But where I'm coming from was the last meeting where we were hearing about some of these things for the first time, specifics like council, we're waiting on you for design decisions. And this was the first that we had heard of that. This is where I think the timeline would be helpful so that we have some visibility into what's going on. When do things need to happen? Just so that we don't feel like we're being caught off guard. There sounds like there's quite a few things that have been going on in the background that we may not be aware of. And as Mr. Penger talked about, trying to combine everything, the RDAs with economic development, that made sense. And I could see how, okay, some of the RDAs did hit the economic development side. We didn't necessarily bring that up in an RDA meeting. So when I think about RDA, I wasn't making the connection between the two, but I think having some sort of documents or conversation showing where the pieces are connected, what pieces are missing, will help us, because right now we are seeing these little bits and pieces here and there that keep coming up when we're asked in the budget specifics, like, well, this RDA can fund these specific projects, but we haven't had the conversation about, well, what's the bigger strategy? It feels like a lot of it's spell.
And if I may, that's part of the, and again, I'm the new guy. So I'm coming in and we're having conversations about, for example, gateway signs, lighting, specific berms along corridors, all valuable projects, but where do they fit in the overall vision of the city and what we're trying to accomplish as it relates to, for example, business retention, business development, improving aesthetics, so on and so forth. And that's, I guess that's where I'm coming from, where I would like to come from is, let's be thoughtful and strategic in how we approach this. And we can get you the specifics of what we are talking about in relation to this upcoming budget. But prospectively, I would hope that we can tie decisions to specific recommendations as part of a broader plan. Because I think that broader plan can get us to a destination. I kind of feel like we're heading down the road, and we're getting off at an off ramp, and then we're kind of looking around and seeing if we want to stay there, and then we're getting back on the road, potentially on the on ramp, and we're coming on and off a road and a path, but we're never really getting to a destination. Where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? What do we need to do to get there? So I'll stop talking now.
So-
Member Green.
I don't disagree with some of that. But what I want to make sure of is that it's not the consultant's vision of West Jordan, it's our vision of West Jordan. And we have seen what has happened on multiple occasions with property across the street. We hire a consultant, they come in and say, here's your vision, and it's not anything that we want. And so it gets pushed by the wayside, it gets shot down, it doesn't work because we've never asked what the end is in sight.
And I'm not suggesting that they come to you with the vision. I'm suggesting that they come to you with a discussion as to what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what are the threats associated with the city that we need to be mindful of. What's our leakage analysis as it relates to retail development? What are our key, for example, development opportunities that we have? And then you, as an RDA board and as a city council, then set the priorities and set the vision commensurate with the information that you have.
And
Because I completely agree with you. It is your plan, it is our plan, and it shouldn't be told to us what we want, but I think we can rely on experts to provide us background information that serves as the foundation in your decision making.
The other comment that I'll leave with is that we're talking about the redevelopment agency, right? Typically, in the history of redevelopment agencies, at least in my experiences with them and fighting a couple of them 30 years ago, when they said weeds were blight on an open field. Part of the redevelopment agency's goal is to deal with blight. And I want to make sure that we're dealing with error. I mean, there's a reason why RDA 4 is set up, why RDA 4 is set up. And we can just, you know, I think if you ask every, you know, all 7 of us why RDA 4 is RDA 4, we can tell you why it's got the blight area. It's not, but so that's what I want to make sure of is that it's, yes, we need economic development. Yes, we need a good vision, but we also have to remember that we're in the weeds dealing with fighting the blight of very specific RDA areas. And so that's, I just don't want to lose sight of that. And, you know, we, like I said, we as a council have had, or as a board have had multiple presentations, and this is the way it should. And I want to just make sure that we're doing the process right, and that people hear what some of the priority, where we think that there is blight that we ought to look at and not skip those areas because for whatever reason they're not important. We don't think they're important. You know, for some reason the corner of 70th South and Redwood is more important than the 10 vacant pieces of property or whatever it is that we own on the street. So I just want to make sure we get everything focused as we do that.
All right. Any other comments for this evening for the Redevelopment Agency Board?
Can I move to adjourn? Or do we have consent items? I'm going to move to approve consent items.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Green, second by Board Member Whitelock. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair rules that passes.
Now I'm going to move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Green, second by Board Member Whitelock. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned.